Think back to your school days, your teacher confidently drawing that diagram of the tongue on the board, mapping out zones for sweet and salty. They told you diamonds were just super compressed coal, and that lightning never strikes the same place twice. Sound familiar? We absorb that knowledge, accepting it as undeniable truth. But what if I told you almost all of it is a lie? Today, we are going to take your old school textbook and ruthlessly tear out 20 pages. Get ready, because we are embarking on a journey through the most famous scientific myths that were presented to you as absolute fact. And I promise you, after this video, you will start questioning everything you thought you knew. But before we start our debunking session, let's understand why this happens. Did every teacher in the world conspire to mislead us? Of course not. The thing is, science isn't a rigid rule book. It's a living, constantly evolving process. What was considered fact 50 or 100 years ago might be disproven today by newer, more accurate research. Unfortunately, school curricula often struggle to keep up with the pace of scientific discovery. They cling to old, oversimplified, and sometimes incorrect concepts simply because they are easy to explain. That's how myths are born, passing down from generation to generation. But our job is to separate the wheat from the chaff. So, let's begin. The first myth we're going to debunk is that humans only have 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. This classic classification was handed down to us by Aristotle. While groundbreaking for its time, modern science takes a much broader view. Neurobiologists still debate the exact count, but most agree that we possess at least 9 senses, and some researchers count upwards of 20. Just consider these examples: the sense of balance, which relies on the vestibular system; the feeling of temperature, known as thermoception; the perception of pain, or nociception. And what about proprioception? That inherent awareness of where your body parts are in space. It's thanks to proprioception that you can touch your nose with your eyes closed. So the next time someone brings up the 5th, or even the mythical 6th sense, you can confidently tell them you have at least 20. And you'd be absolutely right. Let's talk about a major culinary myth: the idea that specific parts of your tongue detect specific tastes. You know the picture. The tip is dedicated to sweet, the sides handle sour and salty, and the back is reserved solely for bitter. You can completely ignore that scheme. This so-called tongue map is actually the result of a misinterpretation of research conducted way back in 1901 by German scientist David Hennig. Hennig did find that certain areas were slightly more responsive to specific tastes, but that difference is so minuscule that it's scientifically negligible. In reality, the taste receptors responsible for recognizing all the basic tastes, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and yes, even umami, are distributed evenly across the entire surface of your tongue. So that neat, simple diagram you still see printed in some textbooks has absolutely nothing to do with reality. Let's switch gears and talk about physics. The idea that glass is actually an incredibly slow-moving, highly viscous liquid sounds beautifully poetic, doesn't it? People often cite old stained glass cathedral windows as proof. They claim these ancient panels are noticeably thicker at the bottom because the glass has supposedly dripped or flowed downward over hundreds of years. It's a gorgeous narrative, but unfortunately, it's pure fiction. Structurally, glass is what we call an amorphous solid. While its molecules are arranged randomly, similar to a liquid, they are actually locked rigidly in place. The real reason those ancient panes have varying thicknesses simply comes down to the imperfect manufacturing technology of the era. Glass makers at the time couldn't produce perfectly uniform sheets. When glaziers installed them, they chose to place the thicker, heavier edge at the bottom for better stability and support. So, rest assured, your window pane isn't going anywhere, not even a millimetre, in the next 1,000 years. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. We often use this saying to reassure ourselves that trouble won't happen again. But from a physics standpoint, this is total nonsense. In reality, lightning strikes the same spot constantly. It actually prefers to do so. The electrical discharge is always looking for the shortest path to the ground, and that usually means the tallest objects in the vicinity: skyscrapers, trees, and radio towers. Take the famous Empire State Building in New York, for example. It gets hit by lightning, on average, anywhere from 23 to 100 times a year. So, this saying is a dangerous misconception. If you see where lightning has struck, that location doesn't become a safe zone. It actually becomes a more likely target for the next strike. Now for a little bit of zoology. Poor goldfish are constantly mocked for the persistent myth that they only have a 3-second memory. This idea is so pervasive, it's become a staple joke in pop culture. But that widespread belief does a grave injustice to these creatures. Numerous studies have proven that goldfish possess surprisingly decent memories, capable of retaining information for up to 5 months. They can recognize their owner, distinguish specific auditory cues related to feeding, and even successfully navigate simple labyrinths. One famous demonstration involved an Australian schoolboy who, in an experiment, taught a fish to associate a specific sound with food. He then released it into a local river. 6 months later, he returned to the exact spot, played the same sound, and the fish swam right back. So the little pet in your aquarium remembers far more than you give it credit for. Let's continue our discussion on the animal kingdom. We're talking about the image of lemmings committing mass suicide by throwing themselves off cliffs. This dramatic picture is deeply ingrained in popular culture, largely thanks to Disney Studios. In 1958, their documentary, White Wilderness, featured exactly such a scene. The only catch: the scene was entirely staged. The film crew simply herded the unfortunate rodents toward the drop and actually pushed them into the water. In reality, lemmings are not suicidal. Every few years, their population spikes dramatically. In search of food and new territory, they embark on a mass migration. During this chaotic movement, some individuals may accidentally fall from a cliff or drown while attempting to cross a river. But this is a tragic accident, not a conscious choice. Now let's talk about us. The common saying, "humans evolved from monkeys," is something we hear constantly. However, this statement is fundamentally wrong and completely misrepresents the core of evolutionary theory. We did not evolve from modern chimpanzees or gorillas, just like you don't descend directly from your own cousin. The more accurate way to put it is that humans and modern apes shared a common ancestor, an extinct primate species that lived millions of years ago. At some point, the evolutionary tree diverged into 2 branches. One branch eventually led to the emergence of the genus Homo, while the other led to the modern great apes. Therefore, chimpanzees are our evolutionary cousins, not our great-grandfathers. This is a crucial distinction that is frequently overlooked. Let's get back to physics and one of the most enduring myths, the idea that water drains in opposite directions in the northern and southern hemispheres due to the Coriolis effect. It sounds very convincing and scientific. The Coriolis effect truly exists. It is an inertial force that influences global weather phenomena like cyclones and ocean currents. However, its impact on such a small object, like a sink or a bathtub, is negligible. The direction the vortex spins is 99.9% determined by the shape of the basin, the direction the water stream hits it from the faucet, and the tiniest imperfections near the drain hole. For the Coriolis effect to actually become noticeable, you would need an absolutely perfectly round basin, several kilometres in diameter, with a perfectly smooth bottom, which had been left completely undisturbed for several weeks. So, ultimately, it's just a beautiful myth. Ah, the 10% brain myth. Hollywood screenwriters absolutely love this one. The concept is certainly flattering to our ego. Just imagine the untapped superpowers we could unlock if we could access that other 90%. Unfortunately, I have to be the bearer of bad news. This idea is complete fiction. Modern scanning technology, specifically MRI and PET scans, clearly shows that even the simplest tasks, like having a conversation or simply clenching your fist, require significantly more than 10% of the brain. In reality, over the course of a day, we utilize nearly all 100% of our grey matter. It's just that different regions are active at different moments. The brain is an incredibly expensive organ. It consumes about 20% of the body's total energy. Evolution simply would not have allowed us to carry such an energy-intensive and mostly useless piece of ballast on our shoulders. Blind as a bat. This familiar idiom is a classic example of a factually incorrect saying. In reality, bats are far from blind. They possess functional eyes and are perfectly capable of seeing. While their vision isn't as sharp as an eagle's, and they struggle in bright daylight, during twilight hours they can see just as well, if not better, than a human. However, when tracking fast-moving insects in total darkness, relying solely on sight simply isn't sufficient. That's where evolution stepped in, equipping them with the astonishing mechanism of echolocation. They emit high-frequency sounds and analyze the reflected echoes, allowing them to build a detailed sonic map of the world inside their brains. So echolocation isn't a replacement for vision, but a powerful supplement to it, a kind of natural super sonar system. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure visible from space. This notorious space myth circulates endlessly in guidebooks and has even made its way into some textbooks, but not a single astronaut has ever confirmed it. From low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station resides, it is virtually impossible to spot the wall without powerful magnification. While the structure is incredibly long, it is quite narrow, and its colour simply blends in with the surrounding terrain. Meanwhile, many other human creations are clearly visible from that same orbit. These include large cities, especially at night, the Egyptian pyramids under certain lighting conditions, major airfields, and even wide highways. Furthermore, contrary to another popular variation of this myth, absolutely no man-made structures are visible from the moon. From that distance, our planet looks like nothing more than a blue and white marble. But here's an urban legend that even the Mythbusters took on. The idea is that if you drop a simple coin from the top of a skyscraper, it will accelerate to the speed of a bullet and be able to kill a person on the ground. That sounds terrifying, but fortunately, the laws of physics are firmly on our side. Every falling object has what scientists call a terminal velocity. This maximum speed is reached when the force of air resistance perfectly balances the downward pull of gravity. A small coin is very light and has an inefficient, irregular shape for aerodynamic travel. Because of the intense air resistance it encounters, its maximum speed won't exceed 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. Yes, getting hit on the head by a falling coin would certainly be unpleasant, perhaps painful, like a strong insect bite, but it is absolutely not lethal. A much greater danger is actually posed by falling tools or even carelessly dropped cigarette butts from those same heights. The historical myth. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. While Edison's name is inextricably linked to this invention, giving him sole credit is unfair to countless other scientists. Edison was a brilliant engineer and businessman, yet he was certainly not the first to conceive of the electric incandescent lamp. Before him, dozens of inventors worldwide had been developing the idea, including the Englishman Joseph Swan and the Russian scientist Alexander Lodygin. They had already created working prototypes. Edison's true genius, however, lay elsewhere. He didn't merely invent the bulb. He engineered and patented the first commercially successful, reliable and long-lasting model, utilizing a carbon filament within a vacuum glass enclosure. More importantly, he developed the entire infrastructure necessary to support it: sockets, switches, generators, power plants, and the complete electricity distribution system. He was the one who truly made electric light practical and accessible to the world. Let's debunk a common myth from the world of reptiles, that chameleons change colour primarily for camouflage. We tend to picture them sitting on a green leaf and instantly turning green, or switching to brown when they move onto a branch. That's only partly true. While camouflage certainly plays a role, it is far from the main reason why they switch colours. For a chameleon, colour is first and foremost a language of communication and a crucial tool for thermoregulation. They use colour to signal their mood, readiness to mate, intimidate rivals, or even ward off predators. For example, dark colours help them absorb heat and warm up faster in the sun, while bright or light colours help them reflect heat and avoid overheating. Ultimately, a chameleon's colour change is a complex social signal and physiological response, rather than just a simple attempt to blend in with the background. The image of Vikings in horned helmets is so deeply embedded in our culture that it's often mistaken for historical truth. However, archaeologists will tell you there is absolutely no evidence that Vikings ever wore them. All actual Viking Age helmets recovered are simple metal or leather skull caps, sometimes featuring protection for the nose and eyes. A horned helmet would have been terribly impractical in combat. It would easily snag an opponent's weapon and would certainly hinder movement in formation. So, where did this myth originate? It was popularised by 19th century artists and cemented by Richard Wagner's opera, The Ring of the Nibelung. The costume designer for the 1876 production, Carl Emil Dupler, created those now famous horned helmets specifically for the show. The resulting visual was so striking and memorable that the world still hasn't managed to shake the image. There is a persistent myth in the fields of education and psychology that people have distinct learning styles. You've undoubtedly encountered this theory. It claims that some people are visual learners, absorbing information best through images. Others are auditory learners who need to listen. And a third group are kinesthetic learners who must physically touch things and learn by doing. This idea is incredibly popular, forming the foundation for thousands of training programs and methodologies. The problem, however, is that there is absolutely no serious scientific evidence to support its effectiveness. Numerous studies have shown that matching instruction to a person's preferred style offers zero educational advantage. We all inherently use different channels of perception, and the most effective way to learn is always by combining them. Look at the diagram, listen to the explanation, and then try doing it yourself. Ultimately, labeling people as visuals or auditories is nothing more than a catchy, but ultimately useless label. The parental myth. Sugar causes hyperactivity in children. How many times have you heard this at a kid's party? Don't give him any more cake, he's already bouncing off the walls. The link between sweets and unruly behaviour seems obvious, but in reality, this is a classic case of false correlation. More than 20 controlled scientific studies have failed to find any direct connection between sugar consumption and hyperactivity or attention deficit in children. So why does the myth persist so strongly? The explanation is simple. Children usually consume a lot of sugar in highly stimulating environments, at birthday parties, holidays, or when visiting friends. It is the atmosphere of fun and permissiveness itself, not the slice of cake, that causes their high level of activity. Parents simply link two events that are happening at the same time. But here's a myth that definitely worried many of us as kids, that cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis later in life. Our parents and teachers often use this to scare us, but rest assured, we can set your mind at ease. That characteristic sound is not the result of bones grinding together. It happens because gas bubbles are rapidly collapsing within the synovial fluid, which lubricates our joints. When you stretch the joint, the pressure inside drops. This causes dissolved gases to form a bubble, which immediately collapses, creating that distinct popping sound. Numerous studies, including one where a doctor cracked the knuckles on only one hand for 60 years, have shown absolutely no link between this habit and the risk of developing arthritis. So while cracking your knuckles might still annoy the people around you, it is completely harmless to your joints. And the final urban legend we need to address is the myth that the average person swallows 8 spiders while sleeping during their lifetime. This widely circulated statistic has caused widespread arachnophobia for decades. But let's apply some logic. A sleeping human is hardly an appealing environment for a spider. We breathe heavily, snore, toss and turn, and our heart is constantly pounding. For a spider, which senses the world through vibrations, a sleeping person's bed is the epicenter of an earthquake. They will try to flee from you as quickly as possible. Moreover, for this to happen, a spider would have to crawl into your open mouth, choose not to escape, and you would have to swallow it reflexively without noticing it was there. The chance of all these coincidences aligning is virtually zero. This fact was actually invented by a journalist in the 90s, simply to demonstrate how easily people believe absolute nonsense they read online. And clearly, as we can see, her experiment was an overwhelming success. So there you have it. Those 20 pillars of school knowledge that we once thought were set in stone turned out to be nothing more than myths, misconceptions, or massive oversimplifications. But does this mean your teachers were wrong, or that school education is useless? Absolutely not. This beautifully illustrates the main idea of science. It never stops evolving. Knowledge isn't a final destination. It's an endless journey of corrections, refinements, and new discoveries. The most crucial takeaway here is the need to think critically. Always ask questions and never take anything at face value, even if it's written right there in your textbook. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed our investigation, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future myth-busting episodes. Now, we have a question for you. Which fact from your school days featured on our list surprised you the most? Or maybe you know another popular myth that we didn't mention. Let us know in the comments below. Let's work together to build the ultimate collection of scientific misconceptions.